Hey sis, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Kaylin and we are back with another video. Today's video is going to be all about this lovely book. We are talking all things boundaries. So if you're interested in hearing about boundaries, how you can set them, why they're good for you, and kind of like navigating through setting boundaries and keeping them with certain people and just different situations, this is a video for you. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get into it. So this book was right on time for me. This book was so good. I've had it for a while. I think I got it last year for Christmas, and this book is just amazing. And it's by Lysa Terkeurst, which y'all already know if you've watched my content. I love this woman and I have mostly all of her stuff. So Good Boundaries and Goodbyes is about loving others without losing the best of who you are. It says relationships are wonderful until they're not. Have you ever thought, I can't keep doing this, something has to change? Or I've tried to fix this relationship but nothing is working. I fear I'm becoming someone I don't even like. Or even, I love this person but this is starting to feel impossible. You've listened to all the advice but you're beginning to realize that if the other person doesn't want to change what's broken in the relationship, you can't change it on your own. So now what? For years I've struggled through these questions and more. I understand this dance with dysfunction on a deeply personal level, and though the details of your situation may be different from mine, I want to be the friend who comes alongside you with compassion to show you that it isn't unloving to set a boundary and it isn't unchristian to say goodbye. In fact, these may be the missing pieces you need to fully embrace in order to love people well and not lose yourself in the process. I think you'll be relieved to learn that boundaries aren't just a good idea, they're a God idea. And I'll be with you every step of the way as we navigate these hard topics together. So that is like a little excerpt. This book basically helps you understand 5 factors to remember when implementing healthy boundaries, determine the appropriate amount of personal and emotional access someone has to you based on how responsible they'll be with that access, which what we talked about in the last video with relational intelligence, like who has what access to you. Stop being misled and emotionally paralyzed by wrongly interpreted or weaponized scriptures that perpetrate unhealthy dynamics in difficult relationships. And then she'll teach you how to overcome the frustrating cycle of ineffective boundary setting with realistic scripts and practical strategies to help you communicate, keep, and implement healthier patterns. She'll also help you be equipped to say goodbye without guilt when a relationship has shifted from difficult to destructive and is no longer sustainable. And then you'll just get some therapeutic wisdom from Lysa throughout the book. It has 12 chapters. And it is 234 pages, so it's not that long. I pretty much just kind of picked it up here and there when I felt like I wanted to read it. I didn't read it straight through. So I have my little notes. I just want to share some things with you guys. Like I said, we're going to start everything off with defining what things mean. So what are boundaries? A boundary is something that indicates or fixes a limit or extent. It reduces the access to the level of responsibility that a person is capable of. So boundaries protect the right kind of love and help prevent dysfunction from destroying that love. They help us say what needs to be said, do what needs to be done, and establish what is and isn't acceptable. When we're hurt, Good Boundaries and Goodbyes helps us to not get stuck in a perpetual state of living hurt. So just some things that I picked out while reading were sometimes our expectations for people may be unrealistic. Throughout things like, you know, people may want someone to always be there or do things that some people just aren't capable of doing. And it comes to like a tricky point when you're relying on people so much in ways that they can't fulfill, that only God can, is where we kind of have to realize like some things are unrealistic. By all means, some things are very realistic, and if people just can't do them, then they just can't do them. Like that's just somewhere you have to realize that maybe you need to shift the access that they have to you. But we have to understand what it is that we are expecting of people and what it is that only God can give us. Another thing was we may be too easily offended. The main point of this book that I think is important is relationships can be difficult at times, but they should not be destructive to our well-being. And I think once you start to get to a point where a relationship is destructive to you, like your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, that's the time where a boundary needs to be set. Where there's chaos, there's usually a lack of boundaries. It talks about like all kinds of triggers and trauma and how that can bring up things in relationships. And then she just stresses that it's not unchristian to require people to treat you in healthy ways. There are a lot of relationships that are unhealthy, that are toxic, that are just not good for you. And it is not wrong if a relationship is not good for you and it's detrimental to, like I said, your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual self, then it's not wrong to require people to either ask, like have the conversation, have them see like, is this something that they can change, give them a little bit of time to change, but it's not something that you can force someone else to do. And if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. So it's not wrong for you to then set boundaries to protect yourself. She points out a scripture, Proverbs 4 verse 23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. People who are irresponsible with our hearts should not be granted great access to our hearts because of this verse. Everything that we do flows from our heart. So if our heart is wounded and we're giving all these people access and, you know, they're doing things to us and it's creating like bitterness, anger, all that, that's what's going to be planted into our heart, and then it's going to flow out of us. So we have to do better at protecting our hearts and guarding our hearts and not allowing everything in, everyone in, everything in, to protect ourselves, because access requires responsibility. If you're not going to be responsible with the well-being of my heart, my feelings, all that, then we're going to have to reestablish boundaries and the access that you have to me. One thing that I also was working through within therapy, adults inform, children explain. When I read this, I was like, wow, that's true. Because have you ever just like maybe not wanted to do something, or you're not comfortable with something, and you just give like this long explanation to the person, and you're just like trying to make it like you're making like so that they kind of feel better at the end of it. Like say you don't want to go somewhere and you're like, oh well, I have this to do and that to do. We don't have to explain any of that. And that's like crazy. You do not have to explain your boundaries. You do not have to explain from A to Z why you set this boundary, why you really don't. You can, but you don't have to. And I think that is like crazy, like wild when I read it. You do not have to explain your boundaries. You can simply say, no, this is not for me. This is not something I want to do. This is not good for me. So it is a no. You do not, if someone, why? I don't have to, you don't have to explain it. And I thought that was a real big takeaway. So another thing is boundaries are just meant to protect you. Big thing. People are not always going to understand your boundaries. They're probably not going to. They're going to think that they can get around it. They're going to try to get you to shift and move around your boundaries so that you basically stop committing to them. That should not stop you from having boundaries. Some may not consider how their actions affect your relationship and your need for the boundaries. Some people are just comfortable in the dysfunction she was talking about. But she said you do not have to stay in the same place that the other person is just because they might be comfortable with the toxicity, the dysfunction, the miscommunication, all that. You don't have to stay there if you don't want to. Health, she said, cannot bond with unhealth. It's either that person's going to change to then be healthy, or they're going to drag you in to be unhealthy and you're going to stay in that unhealth, and it's going to cause more harm to you. Another verse she said was Galatians 1:10, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or God? And I think when it comes to boundaries, a lot of people are kind of nervous to start boundaries because I think a lot of us are people pleasers. We want to please people. Like at the end of the day, yeah, we want to please people. We want to keep everyone around us happy. We want the peace, all that. But we can't do that if it affects us. Like it gets to a point where it affects us a little bit too much negatively. So she mentioned paying attention to those who accept our healthy boundaries and those who resist them. Those who resist them, you need to put a little bit of restriction, have some boundaries with them. Another thing that she said is we need to know who we are. If we do not know who we are, we will constantly be manipulated into who others want us to be, or we will become people lost in the needs of other people. Wild. This book has so many points that were just like, I just have to close the book and reflect on this because wow, you have to know who you are. You cannot be who everyone wants you to be. You're only called to be who God created you to be, and that is what is most important. She talks about healing, staying aligned with God's truth to be the best you. The only person who secures our identity is Jesus Christ. That is it. Not who people say we are. None of that matters. We have to start prioritizing just focusing on this is who God created me to be, this is what he said, and tuning out what other people say we are and all that, because they are not there. Those are lies. The truth of who you are in Christ is exactly what Jesus says you are. It said whole people tend to gravitate toward whole people, fractured people tend to attract other fractured people, which I think that makes sense because it's like a trauma bond. Like if you're going through something and someone else is going through the same thing, you guys kind of come together. If it's the opposite, or like you have something good going on and you meet other people that have something good going on in that same area, you bond over that. So you tend to gravitate towards people who are experiencing similar things to you or have things in common. So if you're hurt, you're gonna be fine hanging out with hurt people and not see anything wrong with it. The last part that she talked about was goodbyes. Sometimes for good to happen, goodbyes have to happen first. And it's always hard to end anything, especially something that you were invested in. But we have to keep focused on doing the will of Christ. Some goodbyes are for a season, some are forever. I think as an adult, that is one of the things that has been hardest to navigate and figure out, or figure out how to understand, is that everything and everyone is not meant to go into every season with you, and you kind of got to give yourself grace to work through that and understand that, because some people are going to be a part of your life in this time, some people are going to be a part of your life in this time, some people are going to be a part of your life that God sends you for the future. But she said when you're getting to the point of saying goodbye, you've done all you can, you tried, there's no change, the boundaries aren't working, you're still not, well, that if you have to say goodbye to someone or something, it's not giving up, it's just truly accepting the reality that this is just not working. She talks about how we have to pay attention and be honest about how someone's poor behavior and lack of responsibility is possibly controlling you. I think we kind of minimize how much power we give people to over us and our emotions, and someone driving in traffic cuts you off, how angry people get, and the road rage. We give people a lot of power over our emotions and feelings, and I think it is important to sit and realize if that's something that happens to you, why? You gotta dig a little bit deeper and figure out what's going on here and how can you change this so that you aren't giving so much emotion and feeling to these people and then changing your whole day and your whole mood based off of someone else's actions. So if you're constantly in relation with this person and their everyday kind of thing, and they're causing you to come out of your emotions, you kind of have to figure out can I continue on like this? Probably not. And that's where you need to start establishing boundaries, or eventually just saying goodbye, whatever is going to be best for you in the situation. She talks about if healing isn't possible if you stay in the relationship, then take a separate path toward peace. And I think this is so important. Separations and saying goodbye and moving forward, it doesn't have to be an angry thing, it doesn't have to be a nasty thing, it doesn't have to be something that comes out of a place of anger and bitterness and hurt. You can just make that decision and move forward in peace. You do not have to start a whole world war whatever. You don't have to do that. You can just make that conscious decision. You can have a adult conversation explaining your feelings, talking about everything, and then just move forward in peace and just accept that, like we talked about, everyone's not going to come to every season with you. God does not always mean for everyone to, and that's okay. But you can leave with the good memories and not leave it in a place where it's bad and just still causing issues and all that kind of negativity. So you can take a separate path towards peace. Unsustainable relationships involve grieving and accepting one of the toughest realities that just everyone's not meant to stay, and that's grieving. That is grieving. It's sad. When any kind of relationship ends, romantic, friendship, any of that, it's sad when it ends, but it's a part of life. Unfortunately, it's a part of life. She gives a couple verses. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 6, there's a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away. And that kind of just shows sometimes we do have to say goodbye, and that is okay. There is a time for everything, which I love Ecclesiastes. I read that maybe a couple months ago. But there's sometimes a time to give up. When there's nothing more that you can do, you give it to God, continue to have your boundaries, and you move forward and you go in peace. Matthew chapter 5 verse 44, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. It does not have to be nasty. You don't have to, your boundaries don't have to be out of control. You should still pray for everyone, and he instructs us, Pray for your enemies. Pray for those who do wrong to you, who, you know, take advantage of you, cross your boundaries, whatever it is. Continue to pray for them and put it in God's hand. We have to learn how to move forward with Jesus in our healing. What's ahead has to be better than what's behind. God has promised us a hope and a future. We gotta stop looking in the past. And it's just something like you hold on to, like that betrayal or anger or hurt because of trauma. And that's why it's so important to heal, so that these triggers and trauma responses can be minimized, so that we can focus on what's important. There is so much more. He wants to do exceedingly abundantly above all things. He wants to do more in your life, and he cannot do more, and we cannot accomplish our purpose and what it is that he placed on this earth to do if we are constantly looking at what's behind and what's happened, and we're just stuck like looking back. We have to look forward, we have to push forward, and that goes with healing ourselves and taking time to do that. It takes time. It's going to be a grieving process. It's not easy, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary so that we can have the tools to protect ourselves and be who God created us to be. The last thing that I just wrote was, what hurts us will not be our full story. And I just think that's something to end on, because whatever happened to you, whatever someone did to you, whatever you went through, any circumstances, it's not the end. It's just a part of your story. It's not the full story. God has more. The story is continuing to be written if you're waking up every morning with breath in your body. And I just encourage everyone to, if you're going through something and it's really taking a toll on you, or there's like relationships that are just not the best for you right now during this time or ever, to just try to establish some boundaries. This book is a great resource. I encourage everyone to get it. It will be linked down below. And yeah, just work through it. Boundaries are amazing. Once I started setting boundaries, so much has changed. I don't carry as much on me anymore. I don't carry other people's things, because that's another thing. Like, you can get so used to like just everyone dumping things on you, and now you're carrying it, and that's not healthy for you. So boundaries are beautiful. They are a gift from God, and we should all get better at setting boundaries in our lives so that we can be emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually healthy, and be who God created us to be. So thank you guys for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to pick up your copy if boundaries is something that you are working on in your journey currently or want to start working on. And 10 out of 10, it was really good. So if you enjoy videos like this, stay tuned. I will be doing most of these videos on Thursdays, so just stay tuned. If you have any requests on like topics, I can see if I have a book or can find a book, and then we'll talk about it together. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.